I'm Phil Tierney from Chester, Connecticut. You are listening to ICRV Radio, the stream feeding the River Valley.
Welcome to ICRV Radio. We are thrilled that you are tuning in for the next episode of what is turning out to be a wonderful program, very fun. You know, everybody has a story, and everything has a story too, but especially when it comes to vintage jewelry, vintage clothing, all that fun stuff. And we have a wonderful guest host with us, Gay Sherman-Wentz, who's going to be hosting If This Brooch Could Talk.
Hey, Abby.
Hey, we are glad to have you in the studio today, and we are looking forward to learning about vintage jewelry and celebrities. Everything about the stories behind the jewels and the celebrities who wear them.
Oh, yeah, they're making it quite popular, actually, and my business thanks them.
You are quite the expert between being able to appraise things and also to also market them as well. You have a wonderful collection, and some of the earrings that we're going to be talking about, I gather today, are from your collection.
Yeah, I have quite the collection, probably over 1,000 pieces right now, and it's constantly ebbing and flowing, so like the river.
Right. And if you go on Facebook right now, you can see some of those amazing pieces of jewelry on our ICRV Radio Facebook page and see some of the celebrities and the shows that they wore them in. And what I think is so cool is how the vintage jewelry, too, yes, it's from the past, but it's also very current. It is so popular now.
Yeah, a lot of the pieces are just so timeless. You know, you can't beat the stuff that was made in the past because as we've talked about before, costume jewelry is never going to be the same again like it used to be. Designers who were, fine jewelry trained designers were designing and patenting this jewelry, and that's not going to happen again. It's mostly stamped out in China now for the most part, although there are still some that are handmade, but they're few and far between. And but these pieces are, a lot of them, particularly if there weren't many made of them, are fairly rare. And that's one of the things the celebrities like about them is, they're not going to walk out on the red carpet and see somebody else wearing their earrings. Just more of a chance to be unique and styling.
And who doesn't want to be?
Yeah.
And you also have with you a guest today. Why don't you introduce her?
Oh, this is Karen Ellman, my biz partner, my bud, my pal, my cohort in all things vintage. She's an expert in her own right in vintage clothing and accessories, and I've been training her along in vintage jewelry.
Absolutely. Good morning.
Oh, it's great to have you. And both of you are successful business ladies. Gay, your business is Under the Sea,
yes.
Vintage Jewelry, it's called. And Karen, yours is Vintage Virtuosa out of Westport, correct?
Correct.
Well,
yes, Vintage Virtuosa.
How did you come up with that name?
Wow, this was some 12 years ago. I was at an estate sale and pulled out a ton of dresses out of a house, and in the middle of the night, I literally couldn't sleep because I started researching the labels of the dresses online and suddenly found a bunch of retail stores that were operating online. And I immediately wanted to try to figure out how to break into that. So the first thing I was going through my mind is, I need a name, a catchy name. So I was thinking virtual vintage, and that was already taken. So I was trying to work with those words, and then vintage I was thinking virtual, virtuoso, but I'm a woman, virtuosa. And then it just
works.
It just hit me.
And you guys have known each other for some time now, yes?
Yeah. Has it been 6 years now, maybe? Something like that?
At least, yes.
How did you originally connect?
Well, it was because of her name, actually, that we talk about that. I actually cold called her. I had moved back to the area. I grew up in Deep River, and when I moved back here, I already had my online vintage business for a couple years at least, and I was looking to connect with other vintage people in the area. And so I literally, totally old school, I went into the Yellow Pages. I don't know if our listeners know what that is anymore,
Right.
but it's an actual book with pages that are yellow. And anyway, I, went to Vintage and was looking through just for Connecticut, and I was just scanning my finger down, and I saw Vintage Virtuosa, because I'm like such a lover of alliteration, and I was like, wow, that's a cool name. Plus I speak Italian, so the virtuosa thing kind of
It works.
hit me just right. And I literally just called her, and we just started chatting. And then she came over to my house in Chester at the time. I literally laid out my entire collection throughout my
She
house. And she was just like, holy cow. And we both felt we struck gold. And we've been together ever since.
It's a great fit between the clothes and the accessories. It's great.
Yeah, it's a good compliment.
And I love, too, we were chatting a little bit earlier about, some of the ways, the interesting stories about how, whether it was the vintage clothing or whether it was the vintage jewelry, how those have wound up being used in some of these amazing television programs, for example, like Mad Men even, and some of the wonderful programs that are out there that really require these authentic pieces of clothing and jewelry.
Yeah, well, definitely Janie Bryant, who was the designer for Mad Men, she's stepped it up a few notches since she did Mad Men. She actually won some Emmy Awards for that show for her designing, not to mention the people who did all the sets with the furniture, and it was so period accurate. It's become the industry standard at this point, wouldn't you say, Karen?
I would say, and I thank her for that, because she has stepped up the game for other costumers, and they are very careful about their selections now in terms of being specific and correct within the decade that their show is set. And I think that's
that's
amazing.
good for us. That means they have to come to us.
Yes.
They need the real deal, man. They need the real vintage.
If we have some listeners out there who are interested in vintage, have some questions about vintage jewelry and clothing as well, we welcome you on this program, as it is interactive, to send in your questions, if you have them, to our Facebook page at ICRV Radio, or you can also email us at info@ICRV Radio, and we'll be happy to pass those questions along live on the air here with you both.
Yeah, bring them on, baby.
And we're going to be chatting, I gather, on the phone in a little bit also with a designer with whom you've worked as well.
Yeah, she's actually a TV actress in the interior design world. She is an interior designer in Chicago. She's actually a hot rising designer. She's been on a number of shows, and she happens to be a lover of vintage jewelry, and she accessorizes herself on TV with my vintage cocktail rings in particular. I'm actually wearing one of them right now, the Vendome
beautiful
cocktail
I love
ring.
it.
She likes some cocktail rings, as you know, tend to be kind of heavy, and they'll slip around on the finger. And Vendome, back in the 60s, designed this ring with a square band, which is adjustable. And the square band keeps it up, upright sitting on your finger when, if it's top heavy, it'll tilt left and right. But with a square band, it stays right on, which I'm sure Colleen loves. So, yeah, she'll be our call-in celebrity. And Karen and I have... one of the things that we've collaborated on is working with some celebrity people, particularly movie people coming in to her shop. She used to have a retail shop on Route 1 in Westport, and we collaborated, me bringing jewelry in her store, working in her store, and one of the pieces ended up in a movie that recently came out last year called Life of Crime, starring Jennifer Aniston and Timothy Robbins. And I'll let Karen talk about the beginning of that, because the movie people came into her store.
Yeah, so there was a team of 3 costumers that came in that, were working on the movie, and it was set in the 70s. So we were prepared when they came. They phoned the store first and told us all about the setting and the era and the scene that they were outfitting these female characters for. And when they arrived, and I quickly called Gay for the jewelry advice. Could you get here now with your jewelry?
Yeah, I literally peeled rubber over to Westport.
Exactly. They were leaving it to us to style the complete outfit with the dress, the jewelry, the accessories, the handbag, shoes, everything head to toe. And that's what I love about these costumers who really want to get it right. They want to get it right down to the decade that they're in. So we went through the store and we hung a bunch of gowns out on a rack and we put the necklaces with them, and they just came in and sort of walked through and did a whole sweep through the store. It was fascinating to watch you could just see their wheels turning as they were going through the dresses and deciding which scenes in the movie that the dresses would be worn in. And I had so much respect for their approach to getting it right. And they came back several times to the store and picked up a bunch of dresses. And Gay's one of the bracelets that she had sold to me previously, so I was able to pull some of her pieces out of my case that I already had in the store. Jennifer Aniston ended up wearing this really amazing, it was a Trifari piece.
Yeah, it was a Trifari.
There's a photo of
70s.
it up on Facebook.
Yeah,
Cool.
we got up on Facebook, and actually her wearing that bracelet, which was in a cocktail dinner scene in the bar at the country club, right?
Correct.
The movie was filmed in Stamford and Greenwich, Connecticut.
Yes.
Yeah. And but if you go to the movie's website, if you go to lifeofcrime.com, they actually the 3 or 4 scrolling photos that are at the top of the website has her with the bracelet on her wrist. Resting on the bar, I think. So I was like, woohoo!
It must be exciting when you see your jewelry there.
I didn't know it was going to end up on Jennifer Aniston. I was like, oh my gosh.
And you know what's interesting, Gay, and I'm not sure I passed this along to you, but...
She's holding out on me again.
Here we go. Jennifer, they presented Jennifer with all the pieces. She selected personally what she was wearing. So,
oh, really?
The costume designers were dressing all the ancillary characters, but Jennifer made her own selections.
Oh.
So
she actually chose my bracelet.
Your bracelet.
Well,
wow, that's cool.
Yes. Your stores and Connecticut, the lower Connecticut River Valley, I've heard from what you mentioned in a previous program, really is a hub for some really great vintage jewelry. What was it you were saying?
Yeah, well, Providence is the costume jewelry capital of the world. That's where most of these companies like Trifari and Coro were based out of Providence. That's where they manufactured. And so our area is like in the halo effect of Providence because we're only about an hour away. So all that jewelry that came pouring out of all those factories and the people that hand did those pieces. In fact, my father, growing up in Woonsocket, Rhode Island, remembers neighbors of his at home, hand setting stones.
Wow.
So,
amazing.
So we're in the riverbed of the flow of the river of costume jewelry. I'm sorry, I have to do that.
It works.
Yeah, that came out of Providence. So, the amount of costume jewelry that's in this area, not to mention Napier was based out of Meriden, Connecticut, which is the oldest and largest costume jewelry company that ever was. So, I mean, we're it, man. We're like the hot spot.
So if you're looking for that vintage jewelry, this is the spot.
Yeah, and a lot of people are surprised by that. They wouldn't think. Everybody thinks, New York City or, the big fashion capitals, Paris, New York, but it was actually the little old Providence, Rhode Island.
Well, your guest that we're going to be chatting with momentarily, she's not from the area either, but she took advantage of your wonderful jewelry. And where is she from?
She's in Chicago, Illinois. As I said, she is a up and coming. Well, she's already kind of there, but she's a rising designer that's won awards, been on TV, and she is a customer of mine. And one of the things that she loves is the Vendome cocktail rings, Vendome in general, which was the couture or the high-end line for Coro, which was one of the big three, one of the top three costume jewelry companies. And she's styling interior design and vintage jewelry on the TV shows.
And which were the shows that she was on?
She's been on a show that was called The Art of Relaxation. I believe that's on Ovation TV. And she'll have to tell you the other ones because she had a number of them. But her name is Colleen Kinder. She's the interior designer who's going to be joining us.
And I believe she may be on the phone right now.
I am actually. Hi, everyone.
Hey, Colleen.
How are you?
Awesome. I'm really glad you could join us this morning.
Thanks for having me.
All the way from Chicago in a different time zone even.
It's a little confusing at times.
Yeah. I used to live in the central time zone, the panhandle, pregnant dangling chads and all that.
Well, we're glad that you could join us too. And we were chatting about celebrities and vintage jewelry. And tell us your story of some of the pieces that you've had the pleasure of wearing.
As you mentioned, I'm an interior designer, so I got exposed to vintage jewelry through all the antique shows around the country. And, when you are working with antiques with clients, that goes kind of hand in hand with the antique jewelry and the vintage jewelry dealers. So I got to know a lot of the dealers, and it becomes a very slippery slope after that. And it becomes an addiction. You start to realize that there's just some amazing pieces out there that I had never been exposed to before. So I got involved in it probably about 10 years ago, and I'm a very large collector of everything from the 20s all the way through the 90s.
Yeah, well, we're right there with you, Colleen. We went down that slippery slope, too. So much so that I had to open a store. I was telling them, Colleen, that you're a lover of my Vendome cocktail rings.
Yes, I adore Vendome. I have a few pieces. In fact, there was a TV show that I was on in the summer of this year for the Ovation channel, and I actually wore your Vendome ring from the 60s, that that bird's nest,
it was a
peacock egg.
Yep.
That was just phenomenal, and that's how I got to know you. I saw that on online, and I fell in love with it and really started appreciating Vendome.
I got you hooked. Yeah, Vendome rocks, man. I mean, those rings are awesome. In fact, the one that you have is called the Blooming Flower ring, just in case you didn't know that. I've had a couple of those. You have the turquoise one, and there's one with a green stone in it. And in fact, House of Lavande, which is a stylist down in Palm Beach that I've worked with, I've connected with some celebrities, they had that ring at one point, and it's probably one of the most popular rare Vendome rings out there.
What is the value of a rare Vendome, for example?
They actually can go up into the $1,000 range. Generally, though, I'd say they're in the anywhere from $150 to $300, and some of the lesser ones can go for $75 to $100, something like that.
Must feel very elegant wearing those jewelry pieces.
Oh yeah, and Vendome was over the top as far as their cocktail rings. In fact, they have one from their ad in 1969. The O in Vendome is this huge faceted crystal ball ring. Have you seen that one, Colleen?
I have seen that, actually. You've had that before. In fact, that was one of the ones I was eyeballing. I have a problem, I admit.
Oh, well, guess what? I just found another one of those. I'm going to tempt you again. Well, that one in particular I love just because it's the O in Vendome in that ad from 1969. And it's such an iconic ring. The one that I recently had that I sold went to a woman in Brooklyn who had bought that ring back in 1969, and it had been stolen from her apartment in New York. And she had been looking for it for a couple years, and she found it on my site. She was so excited to find it again in her 70s. Colleen, for you, but the patenting that Vendome did with the square band on the ring, and the fact that it's some of these cocktail rings are kind of top heavy, and the fact that it has that square band means it's not going to rock and roll on your finger.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's great because it does adjust between usually like a 5 and an 8.
Yep.
So, because a lot of times you'll find vintage rings that are very little. I have small hands, so it's great for me. I have a small frame. I mean, there's been pieces I've picked up that dealers have been like, you'll never get it. And great thing with the vendor off in place, really heavy, seeing you spinning around
while you're flashing.
You noticed.
I know. I was watching your spot, the show that you sent me via email, and you said that the ring showed up when you hugged the person, and I was like, oh, there it is. And I watched one of your other shows, and you had another Vendome ring on, which had red and clear stones, I think.
Oh yes, the garnet.
Yeah.
I think it was the garnet one. Yeah, that's another one. That's also from the mid '60s. But I do love how when you have the opportunity, Gay, is when you put on the ads, the original ads for Vendome, it just puts everything into perspective on just how fabulous they really were.
Yeah,
they
I'm a
really
sucker
did a
for
great
ads.
advertising campaign, and it's just to see that it just kind of adds to the mystique of it, and what it was like, and how popular they were.
Yeah,
and,
they definitely had status in their time, and that's just come back again.
Is it that mystique that draws you into collecting and so forth? I mean, what drew you and your friends into the collecting?
Well, initially, to be honest, it was my mother who inspired me because she collected vintage jewelry, and one of my first pieces was a Christmas tree pin that I gave my minister in Deep River when I was a kid. And then all through high school, I collected stuff. My grandmother would, give me her rhinestone jewelry, and I'd wear them to dances, that kind of thing. And I liked the fact that it was different, that not everybody was going to be wearing it. And, plus a lot of the older stuff tends to be blingy and sparkly, and it was making a statement. It was just something cool to me at the time, and it's never ceased to be cool, right, Karen?
Right.
We'll get you back in here.
Oh, no, that's okay. I am fascinated by everything. For me, it was the quality of the dresses, how they were tailored. When I look at a vintage dress, from the first time I saw one, the word construction and architecture came to mind for me, not just seams and sewing. It was these dresses are constructed.
Right.
And
yeah, they were really made to the form.
Yes. Today,
really
you've
tailored.
Got either the use of sort of elasticity in the fabric to make it fit over the form. Not then. It was the sewing. It was the tailoring. It was the construction of the dress that caused it to fit over the woman's body. It wasn't a stretchy, unless it was on the bias, the 30s bias cut, but that was because of the way they worked the fabric.
Well, tell us some of the stories behind some of the people who wore some of these rings, or maybe who wore some of the vintage clothing that's so intriguing.
Oh, well, some of the movie stories, we started with Jennifer Aniston, and Karen's been holding out on me as we're talking before the show. She's like, "Oh, and I've got a story about Mick Jagger and Scorsese," and I'm like, "Huh?
What?
Do tell."
I want to hear about Jagger.
Well, you know what? It's funny. I must have a good 70s page because I seem to get called for 70s. When I get a call from a costumer, it's usually the 70s. And this show, I think they're putting out a show called Vinyl I'm saying I think because at the time, sometimes you get contacted by the costumers before they've even put a title on the show. But there's an HBO special that Scorsese and Jagger are working on about funk bands in the 70s, and they needed a dress for one of the female characters. She's the manager of one of the funk bands, and they needed to outfit her for one of the concerts that she would be attending.
Was that one going to be on Netflix? Was that going to be a Netflix original, or was that a network deal?
HBO.
Oh, HBO. Okay.
Yes.
And Karen, Colleen, what are some of the things that you're going to be doing looking ahead with some of the pieces that you're going to be collecting for different projects?
It's for me, again, I do different TV shows, different TV spots in the design industry. So, you always kind of want, as Gay says, you always want to take it kind of a notch up and get a little blingy. And, people look to people in my industry to have a little bit of edge. And, like Karen was saying, a lot of times the clothes are just your basics. There's really nothing out there that's super over the top these days, and the jewelry takes it to the whole new level, the vintage jewelry or the vintage clothes. So I'm always looking for, big statement pieces. I love the big necklaces, as you probably saw in one of the shows. The big necklaces, the big cuffs, the chokers. I'm kind of going back to the 90s and pulling the old chokers out and starting to collect some of those.
Yeah,
which
that's
are a
good
lot
to
of
know
fun.
because they were out for a while.
Yeah, and I'm starting to see. I picked up a Christian Dior and a Yohai, and again the big rings and the big cuffs. You're seeing a lot. I've been trying to pick up a lot of big arm cuffs that have been very popular, and everyone seems to gravitate towards them whenever I wear them.
Yeah, actually, I saw one of those on your arm. It was kind of hammered in the TV spot you sent me. It was a pretty long one. I'd say at least 2 or 3 inches long on your wrist.
Oh, that was the Inez.
Yeah.
She actually did
gorgeous.
just a couple pieces. She was Karl Lagerfeld's muse.
Oh, okay.
And, that's an Inez piece. So I've had people offer me money for it. I'm always like, no, go away.
And that's Karl, for our listeners, Karl Lagerfeld is involved with Chanel. Everybody knows Chanel, of course. Speaking of that cuff you're wearing, I've got a Napier one coming in that's kind of dimpled and hammered and is a book piece. It's in the Napier book, so I'll have to show that one to you because I noticed that cuff you're wearing and I was like,
What strikes me is the connections here. When a few of the collectors get together, invariably there's some pieces that change hands.
Yeah, well, she just gave me some hot tips of what I need to be looking for.
That's right. That's right. What's interesting with Napier, I had a Napier employee in my store. And I love her description of working there was not at all an assembly line like today, but each employee who assembled the jewelry, they did one piece from start to finish. So each piece was made or assembled by one employee. And she just remembers sitting there starting with the pieces that were given to her, and by the end of the day or however many days it took her, she had a finished bracelet, but she'd never passed it on to another person to put anything on it.
No Henry Ford
right, no assembly lines at Napier.
Really pouring your heart into it and your creativity,
and that
too.
was in Meriden. She worked for Napier in Meriden.
Yes, and that's exactly it, Ibby. Each employee took ownership on those pieces. So they followed it through to the end, and they cared about what they were doing.
Yeah, personal pride. How about
Personal
that?
pride in their work. And she spoke with pride about it.
Yeah, you could see it in her eyes.
You really could.
She was, she owned it, man.
Well, happy. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and that's something to mention, as far as one of you, I think maybe Karen had touched base on the quality, and probably Gay as well, on the quality. I mean, I have pieces from the 30s that are in better shape than things I've been given. A client of mine actually gave me a current cuff. I won't say who it is, but it was a brand new piece. I don't know where she got it. It was a piece of costume jewelry, and I've worn it maybe half a dozen times, and the finish is starting to fade off of it. And it's just one of my knock-around pieces. I go on job sites and things because it's a great piece, and I like it, but I don't find that with the vintage pieces, the quality. And a lot of people get all torqued out of shape of costume. It's costume, but it's on a whole different level.
Colleen, what is your dream piece, and where did you find it?
Funny you should bring that up. I actually, my birthday was on Sunday, and my significant other gave me a Lanvin necklace that I have been coveting for a very long time.
Karen and I are all about Lanvin
Yes.
I wouldn't mind one of those for a birthday gift, too.
I actually sold a Lanvin necklace suite for Karen in my shop about a year ago.
Yes.
Yeah.
The three one, the green, the black.
Yep.
Yep, that's it.
That's the one.
You got that one?
I almost
Nice.
broke my leg trying to get to that necklace, the one that Gay and I sold. It was at a public sale. I oftentimes buy privately. Well, Gay and I we prefer to buy privately, of course, who wouldn't? But this particular time I was at a public sale, and I
spied that one across the room.
Bolted for it. I did. There were 3 people deep, 3 layers. The line was so long, and then by the time I got to the jewelry sort of, I'm going to say counter, because this was in a house, I was so far back, I literally shouted, "I'm here for the land van." And the woman behind the counter, I said, "I don't see it." I was literally panicking. My heart was, I'm like, I don't see it. She reaches behind her and grabs it in the original box, in its red box.
Yeah.
I said, "That's it." And she hands it over the top of these heads. I literally jumped for it, grabbed it out of her hand. Bye-bye.
Yeah, so forget
I love that piece.
Forget like the holiday store, department store rush. We do that at estate sales,
we do.
man.
We do.
That's so awesome. You got that for your birthday.
That's a great gift.
I was super thrilled. So, in fact, we just seen a movie, and someone had it on, and I was having a hissy fit over it. I don't know if it was American Hustle, but I was just like, "Oh, that's that Lanvin piece I love."
Yeah, actually, the interchangeable one's the one that you got. A lot of the celebrities have been wearing that. It's all over the internet. Some of the different actresses who have worn
many.
that.
Very popular.
Didn't like Keira Knightley wear that one? I want to
Possibly.
say.
I think you're right. I think she did
Keira
wear
Knightley.
it.
Yeah.
Well, happy continued collecting.
Thank you.
And we really appreciate your joining us, Colleen. Your stories have been great, and we love chatting with you. Thank you so much
for having me.
Yeah,
So,
thanks a lot, Colleen, and I'll be calling you about that Vendome ring I got coming in.
Please do. Please do. Happy New Year to all of you.
And you as well.
Thanks. All right, take care.
Okay. Oh my gosh, it is such fun to the energy that goes around when you start talking about these pieces, and with the two of you, for example, and as well with Colleen, the more you know, the more excited it gets because it builds on it. So
yeah, definitely. Now are we up to tip and term now?
Yeah.
We got to get the other 2 T's. We got the whole topic celebrity going.
yeah, what's our next one? We have a jewelry term now, or jewelry tip?
Well, you talked about the part of being in the know, and last time our term was mark and turn it over. That you need to see who made the piece. That's like a huge one. The second one is about dating it. And one of the big things that a lot of people don't know, and this has to do with kind of wintertime with the northern lights, is the term aurora borealis, which is like in itself a very exotic term. I love it. But back in 1955, Christian Dior worked with Swarovski crystals to develop a special coating that they actually put on crystals and glass, and it's iridescent. It's color changing. And that process they called aurora borealis after the northern lights. Dior started it with Swarovski in 1960 or 1953, and it actually hit the stores in 1955. So anything that has that aurora borealis or color-changing coating, which can be, on clear crystal, or they had it in blues and purples, and it basically changes to most of the colors of the rainbow, wouldn't you say?
I would say
blue, purple, pink, green.
And can tend to pick up the colors from what you're wearing. It can tend to reflect those colors.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like
It's
a little
like a chameleon.
It's kind of like a little disco ball. It picks up on the light, and it really pops. I mean, that's why Dior worked with Swarovski crystals, who they're the king of things that pop and bling.
The king of bling.
Yeah, definitely a king of bling. So anything that's got that Aurora Borealis coating on it had to have been made 1955 or after. So many people on looking at vintage jewelry on eBay, something will be Art Deco and it's got a Aurora Borealis coating on it. It's like, no.
Don't think so.
That's an automatic post 1955 dater. If it's got that coating. And then the other one is before 1955. It's funny how the year 1955 plays up, but most costume jewelry was got the copyright symbol in 1955 and after. So I always tell people to remember the year 1955 for Aurora Borealis. After 1955, if the maker mark doesn't have a copyright symbol next to it, usually that means it was made before 1955.
Interesting. So keep that in mind when you're looking for jewelry. And
that year is kind of golden in the costume jewelry world for some reason. It's like copywriting an Aurora Borealis. The planets aligned that year. So that's a good one to look for if you're collecting. Knowing what came after 55 with Aurora Borealis is also the acronym is AB. You'll see. Listings, it'll be like crystal AB necklace, which means crystal Aurora Borealis. Because it's such a long 2-word
and hard to spell.
Yeah.
So a jewelry topic about celebrities, a jewelry term, and I think the third JT, if you will, was a jewelry technique. Is that it? What was the next one?
Tip. Yeah. So the tip is 1955. If it's got doesn't have the copyright symbol, it was most likely made before 1955 if you're turning it over and looking at the maker's mark. And the term is Aurora Borealis, which if it's got that coating on it, whether it be glass, rhinestones, crystal beads, if it's got that color changing coating on it, it was definitely made after 1955. It's not Art Deco, baby.
Yeah.
So if you're going out to buy that gift for your special someone or you're doing the collecting yourself, keep those in mind so you get the right one. Yeah. I wanted to real quickly touch on a couple of photos that are on our Facebook page that you talked about. They were pictures from Mad Men. Really cool. There were some dangly earrings that Megan is wearing that are beautiful.
Oh, yeah, the tassel.
Yeah, those
tassel
are cool.
earrings. Those were from a Trifari 1969 collection called Lend Your Ears, like Lend Me Your Ears from, isn't that Shakespeare?
I think so.
Yeah. It was a collection called Lend Your Ears, and it actually was a magazine ad. And Janie Bryant, the designer for Mad Men, chose those. And, the Hollywood is so hush-hush about this stuff. I actually just contacted Janie again because I was hoping to get her on the show for this time, but she actually will come on the show another time.
Great.
So that's something to look forward to, listeners. We're going to have like a major Hollywood celebrity on our hands. But when I signed up for that show, I had to sign, they faxed me over a confidentiality agreement because Matthew Weiner, the creator of the show, is like so secretive. I'm sure a lot of people who watch Mad Men and read about it in the news knows that, they kept everything under wraps because they wanted, when the show came out, they wanted everything to be a surprise. They didn't want anything leaked to the media, to the public. So I had to sign confidentiality agreements. And when I talked to her the other day, via her assistant, albeit email, she actually started a new job yesterday. She's working on a new TV pilot, which they couldn't even tell me the decade. Because she wants to work with me again with jewelry and everything. And hoping to bring Karen in with some costuming possibly. But literally, they couldn't even tell me what decade the show is.
Ooh, it's so
hush-hush.
It's
majorly
hush-hush.
So anyway, at some point I'll be revealing that on the show, what this TV pilot program that Janie Bryant is working on. But it's something on TV. It's a decade. I don't know what decade, but I said to her in the email, I'm like, well, I got all the decades, so I'm just waiting.
Well,
Yes.
we're excited to hear the news as it comes out and unfolds, and enjoy continuing on the journey with you as you continue to explore all these wonderful jewels and clothes and all of the things that go into the theme of if this brooch could talk, and the fun things that are out there in the vintage world to enjoy and explore.
Lots of stories.
Yes.
Right here in our backyard of the Lower Connecticut River Valley.
Yeah, it's pretty darn cool, and it's one of the nice things about bringing this to your program is, I know one of your terms for your radio show is discover, and there is a major treasure trove of costume jewelry to unearth and discover in this area. So we're going to continue.
We'll continue excavating.
Yeah, we're going to continue excavating with you, Connecticut River Valley. We're here for you.
We look forward to it. Gay, Sherman Wentz, and Karen Ellman, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Ivy.
And we look forward to the next time on If This Brooch Could Talk.
Woohoo.
Getting motivated